When it comes to planning for retirement, oftentimes I'll ask clients if they know the difference between pre-tax and post-tax accounts. When it comes to the decision of saving for retirement, it's an important factor to consider into the equation, because if you think taxes will be higher in the future, you might want to consider putting money into post-tax accounts. If you think taxes will be lower in the future, or that you'll be in a lower tax bracket in the future, you might want to consider putting into pre-tax accounts. So there's two ways to save for retirement in retirement vehicles. You have pre-tax and post-tax. The most common way is pre-tax. You're going to have a lot of times a traditional 401k or IRA. If you work for a school district, you might have a 403b. If you work for the city, you might have a 457 plan. If you're a small business owner, you might do a SEP or a simple IRA. What's important to remember when you're dealing with pre-tax is that none of that money has been taxed. So you're ultimately deferring or delaying that. If you think you're going to be in a lower tax bracket, it's a good way to go. So you look at your current tax bracket that you're currently in when you factor in and make that consideration of which way is best to save for retirement. Post-tax accounts, you have Roth IRA, which if you're married and combined income is roughly around $188,000, it's off the table, and your contribution amount is $5,500 per person. So if you're married and you make more than $188,000, Roth IRA is off the table. What a lot of people don't realize is Roth 401k is not off the table. There's no income restrictions at this point in time as far as what you earn income-wise. You can contribute into Roth 401k, and currently that limit is $17,500 per year that you can put away into Roth 401k. A lot of the times what I encourage people to do is look and see what your match is. If you have a match on your plan, look at your plan document. And if hypothetically somebody were to make $100,000 per year, just for round numbers sake, and they have a 3% match, typically what people will do a lot of the times is they'll be putting in 6, 7, 10% and getting matched 3% on pre-tax. And they're building all that money up in a pre-tax traditional 401k that they will later typically roll into an IRA. What if you think that taxes are going to be higher in the future, a possible solution is to put in your 3% here to get your 3% match in pre-tax, because it's always going to be in pre-tax because it's a tax deduction for the employer. The other avenue for post-tax is municipal bonds, which are backed by the municipalities, and they typically keep up with inflation. And then the other option for post-tax is what we call maximum funded life insurance contracts. So in analyzing where you think taxes will be in the future, one of my favorite questions to ask people is, do you think you'll be in a lower or higher tax bracket when you retire? Or do you think taxes are likely to be lower or higher in the future? Most people would say higher in the future. And one of the reasons why they say higher in the future is because if you look at Social Security statements on here, this is from 2011 and this is from 2012. What it says on here is in 2016, we'll begin paying more in benefits than we collect in taxes. Without changes, by 2037, the Social Security Trust Fund will be exhausted. Then we fast forward a year and a half to May 2012 on this one, and it says without changes in 2033, the Social Security Trust Fund will be able to pay only about 75 cents for each dollar of scheduled benefits. So the question I ask people is, how secure do you think Social Security is? And a lot of times people will say, well, gosh, not that secure. I'm not counting on it. Then I go to one of my sources, and it shows that right now Social Security is the only source of income for 1/3 of seniors. That's it. It's the only source of income. They have nothing else. Then you consider that there's 77 million baby boomers right now. They're retiring right now, 50,000 a day. How many of those baby boomers are okay with taking less Social Security benefits? If we ask them and we do a poll and doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, how many of those baby boomers, when it comes time to get that paycheck of those benefits that they've paid into their whole entire lives, how many are willing to take less? Probably not very many. So ultimately, the largest voting population is not going to vote to take less benefits. So it's kind of a trick question when I asked how secure do you think Social Security is, because it's pretty secure when you look at it from a voting demographic standpoint. The question that we should be asking is, how are we going to pay for it? My prediction is ordinary income. It's going to come from taxes. And okay, great, Carter. Where are the taxes? Is there just money trees that pop up and it's just going to pay for itself? Probably not. So this over here is all taxed as ordinary income. It's not taxed as long-term capital gains. So the more that you take out, the higher that's going to bump up your tax threshold for the tax bracket that you're in, ultimately paying more tax if for some reason we continue to pay benefits and it comes from somewhere. So I think it's going to be people who have jobs and people who have pre-tax retirement accounts, because that combined, last time I checked, there was roughly $7 trillion in these type of accounts that people have not paid the tax on. So when it comes to the conversation of creating what we call tax diversification, we believe that you should have money in both places, that you create a holistic approach where you have multiple vehicles working for you in retirement so that you can control your tax bracket. So one of the questions that people often ask me is, well, gosh, Carter, well, why haven't I heard of this before? Well, it makes sense that taxes will be higher in the future. And I don't want, if tax rates stay the same and they don't go up, question a lot of times I'll ask people is, do you want to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire? That means if tax rates stay the same, if you're living on $100,000 a year, how you are in a lower tax bracket each year is if you live on $70,000 a year. Most people, when they retire, are not wanting to live on less. Now, if your house is paid off and you've prepaid, cars paid off, and things of that matter, then it might be fine to live on $70,000. That might be a great solution for you. But a lot of times people, the house is not paid off and they don't want to live on less. So if tax rates stay the same, how are you in a lower tax bracket when you retire? It's by living on less in retirement. After you swallow that pill, most people aren't. They don't want to live on less in retirement. So what we look at is from a standpoint of in retirement, having tax diversification, being able to pull from those and maximize your tax bracket. So back to the question, why haven't I heard of this before? Number one, I would say the first culprit would be the government/IRS. If you're a farmer, would you rather pay tax on the seed or the harvest if you know it would guarantee and go into a harvest? Most people say, I'd rather pay tax on the seed. Right. That's post-tax. That's what you're doing. You're paying tax on it and letting it grow, compound in vehicles where you don't pay that tax down the road when you pull it out. If you're the government or the IRS, would you rather have people pay tax on the seed or the harvest? A lot of times people will say they probably want us to pay tax on the harvest. The second is going to be Wall Street / the financial advisor. And it's not the financial advisor's fault. These people are often great, well-intentioned human beings. The problem is, it's how do they typically get paid? They get paid by management fees, sales charges, sales loads. And if somebody was going to pay and put money away for retirement, if they were saying they're going to put 10% per year away for retirement, that would be $10,000. Okay? So they put away $10,000 in pre-tax, and then they get their 3% match for a total of $13,000 that goes into retirement. If they put that $10,000 over here and they're in a 30% tax bracket, that's going to equate to $7,000. So at the same interest rate, compounding, we have 10,000 versus 7,000, 10,000 every year versus 7,000 every year, compounding at the same interest rate, which one's going to grow to a higher number? This one. How do they get paid? Because of management fees, fund fees, sales charges. So it isn't necessarily that they want to get into it and they're malicious and they're saying, hey, let's just rake this person over the coals. I don't believe that. I think it's more they just haven't factored in the question of where taxes will be. So a lot of the times they're brainwashed into telling people, hey, your clients will most likely be in a lower tax bracket when they retire, so it makes sense. And they're correct. If you are going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire, it does make sense to put it in a pre-tax. If you think you will be in a higher tax bracket when you retire and taxes are going to be higher to pay for Social Security, Medicare, the national debt, then it makes sense to have post-tax money. Okay. The third is going to be the CPA / tax preparer. And again, a lot of the times they're great people, but what they are trained to do and what's embedded in their mind is how do I get your tax liability down to as low as possible right now this year, or if they're still doing your last year's tax returns. They are not thinking, and they do not want to talk about where they think taxes are likely to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And again, I'm making generalized statements here. There's a handful of CPAs and financial advisors that I do know that do understand tax diversification. But this, if you're going to go talk and say, well, why haven't I heard more about this? It's because the majority of people in, quite frankly, the insurance industry aren't really up to speed with these kind of concepts and utilizing maximum funded life insurance and structuring it properly and have the knowledge to speak to the whole mix of retirement planning products. And typically financial advisors are looking to put it into stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, that sort of stuff, because that's what blows their hair back, and they're usually quite good at it. So when it comes to the decision of looking at tax diversification and creating tax diversification, I'd encourage you to have an open mind, think for yourself, and come up with your own worldview and philosophy in regards to it. Don't necessarily just eat what's served up on a platter, but really ponder and think for yourself. What is the best strategy? What is the best holistic financial plan for you? And be confident and move forward.